This is Tuesday evening, and this is the spiritual discussion program on Bless Radio. This is Saad in the studio here in London, and very soon I'm going to have Gregory joining us. So I'll, while waiting for him to join us, just want to let you know what the show is all about. This is a spiritual discussion program, as the name suggests, and the aim is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdul. And we have a topic of discussion every week. The topic for discussion tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. So hopefully I'm going to get Gregory any moment now. Hello, Gregory. Welcome back.
Hello.
Yes, welcome back to the show. So, dear listeners, this is Saad here in the studio in London, where it is very bright and sunny. I will say hot even. Gregory, please tell us where you are and how is the weather where you are?
Well, it's very warm here in Spain, Valencia.
I see. Wow, that is to be expected in Spain. So, welcome. It's the first time we've heard you from Spain. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Yes, dear listeners, as I said, the aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail Message by Abdul. And the topic for discussion tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. As usual, we'd love you to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 313 66. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 313 66. I'm going to start with what is the Grail Message? The Grail Message is a spiritual, the Grail Message in the light of truth by Abdul is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. For through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail Message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized, and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover, through the intuitive perception, if what is stated is the truth. Combining with the matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail Message, Abdul. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail Message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail Message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, to remind you again, the topic for tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. And you can join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 313 66. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're contacting us from outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 313 66. Again, you can call, text or use WhatsApp. Gregory, this topic tonight, the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. It's like, let's say, not something that people, people think about in the world, what's happening in the world today, and you think of, yes, we're growing and we're fighting for freedom. And then with this program, we always talk about spiritual aspect of life. And maybe this spiritual aspect of life is suppressed in this daily living and earthly struggles that we have to handle or cope with. And even we need reminding sometimes. So maybe we suffer painful incidents, and then we somehow remember maybe there's more to life than just the mundane things. So I would like to start with a question about spiritual growth and what really is spiritual growth?
Well, thanks for that particular question. Like you rightly said, there are 2 aspects. There is the earthly, of which the intellect, the human intellect comes in. And there's the other part, which is the spiritual, of which the human intuition comes into play. In this particular aspect, one is referring to that of the spirit, which expresses itself through one's intuition. The need for it to grow, mature, and return back to its origin. That basically is what one may refer to as growth and maturity, and a return to its origin as a conscious, or more precisely, a self-conscious human spirit.
Thank you for making a brief picture of what this is. So let's go explore it more further now. We've called the topic the struggle for spiritual growth. So really, it's, as I say, it's only in certain moments when we have suffer illness or tragedy that somehow we wake up to, let's say, the significance of life. And otherwise we take things for granted. And so why do you think why is it a struggle that we struggle in this spiritual growth?
Well, it is rightly said when one is referring to a struggle. But the word struggle is the key there. Why is there a struggle? If one takes a very simple instance where, say the case of a musician, or even our everyday life, if we do not practice or use and implement the way it should be used and practice with it again and again and again, because of the lack of practice on many occasions. The time you wish to use that instrument, you find it is difficult, becomes a struggle because we are not familiar to it. Many a thing which would have become second nature, it's more of a drag because you're now forced to follow a path which one has not used for a long time, and therefore one has to go very, very slowly and very carefully. Whereas if that instrument or if that ability had been used again and again and again, it becomes second nature, as you will find with the case of musicians, where a note has to be practiced on several occasions. The same thing with people who sing. They have to practice again and again and again, and which is similar to, you don't want dust to cover up certain things. So you have to keep that ability very active. Since in this case one is referring to spiritual, of which human intuition here is the key when it comes to that of the spiritual. In the scenario where this intuition is not used on a regular basis and only used very infrequently, in cases of very deep sorrow or of pure joy, those are two extremes where sometimes the intuition flashes and comes into play. Otherwise, one's earthly life is filled with very mundane things. Then it becomes understandable that when it comes to things of the spirit, it becomes a struggle because it has not been in use in many occasions.
From what you've said so far, it sounds to me that you've said obviously the more you practice something, the better, more easy it is to use, and so the struggle is really from the lack of use. And
Yes.
in this case, you have said the what is meant to grow spiritually is the use of the intuition. And so I would like to ask you, are we meant to be spiritually active or using our intuition at every moment in our life on the earth, or is it at certain moments?
The human intuition is always about, like, what one may refer to as the strategic decision. And whereas the intellect is only for tactical things, one should always keep one's eye on the goal, on the long-term goal. Therefore, there must be the cooperation between that which is strategic and that which is tactical. If on the one hand, you only face that which is tactical, which are the mundane things, then you lose sight or you lose that ability, which now refers to that of the intuition. Therefore, you will find that even on an everyday thing, there is the need to always concern oneself and say, okay, one should not forget that the goal here is to return home to the human paradise where all is joy and happiness. And in that particular case, whatever one does here on earth is to help to furnish joy and happiness to those you interact with, not to destroy them. They, whom like you, are striving to achieve that which they need to achieve in order to go back home as self-conscious human spirit. So it is true that one must be conscious. One must keep in mind that is the need to go back home as self-conscious human spirit. And only the intuition can always furnish us that. As long as we are always aware, that awareness is ever present, then whatever tactical things we do, we will be very careful and be very cautious. We will weave our path in such a way such that the returns will bring joy not only to us but to others, such that before long, whatever we might have done ill in the past will be severed due to our good volition. Then, in that case, one may say one is free at last, free to move forward in a courageous manner.
Thank you for that. Now I want to look at sort of life experiences people go through, in everyday life in the modern world. You can say we've seen the work-life balance, where people are stressed out, focus so much on work that they miss the home life or the relaxation, and then it affects them, overburdens them and stresses them out. And then, so, for example, let's say, there's so many issues at the moment. People have got depression, just suffering silently, many people. And what I wanted to say there, really, you've mentioned about the strategic and the tactical, strategic being the intuition, the spiritual aspect, and then the intellect, taking care of, let's say, earthly matters. And you've also mentioned about harmonious working of the spiritual and the intellect. So when we are on earth facing our difficulties, how can people sort of have a reconnection with the spiritual things, and can this spiritual just, are we meant to are we being tested, you could say, when people go through these hard experiences of work or whatever situation they're going through? Are they being tested to build the character of the spirit as well, and the resilience? Is that a test, or is it just that we are not connected with the spirit properly, and so we just take the experience in it, always experience it as a difficult experience?
Well, I think the latter is more to the point, because when you say, are we being tested? The question is, tested by who? There is no need for any test. What is needed is always to be conscious of one's responsibility, one's inner responsibilities, to move in such a way so as not to cause confusion to others who, like you, are striving to achieve maturity. So in that particular case, whatever comes one's path is only an act of grace to be able to move forward. The idea of a test is completely out of the question. For whatever the soul or whatever the inner spirit has placed in creation, that is what it's going to reap. It is not a punishment. For when one has placed that which is good and noble, of course, only that which is good and noble will flow back, here or hereafter. If, however, we have other things flowing back to you across your path, some of them could have been what one had sown in the past. At the same time, some of them could be to strengthen you, for the human spirit needs challenges. Even the intellect needs challenges for it to grow strong. It's like an arm. The more you use it for various activities, the stronger it becomes. If, however, you don't use it, you just decorate your hand or your nails and sit down and do nothing, then there will be a problem.
So yes, I was looking at it as a spiritual growth. So like, okay, you said it's not you said it's not testing, but it is building up. You could say like a strength, and in this case, um, I was even looking at, for example, you've mentioned in the past patience and persistence, as one of the qualities that we need to develop, not to just jump and run into something, uh, because that means there's a danger of falling down. And if you do step by step, growing, absorbing what experience you're going through, and then obviously when another experience of that comes later, you are much more ready for that. So
Yes, um, those scenarios also hold, but one should not forget there are processes in life, there are processes in nature. Many are not sure how long these processes will take from the onset to the closing of a particular cycle or process. One is not sure. So this is where patience comes in. In a very simple example, you will find that many a person or a farmer that sows corn in the farm, in 3 months will reap it. Whereas those who now sow cocoa plant or mango or whatever one calls it, it doesn't take 3 months. It takes years for it to mature. Therefore, one must be patient to allow these processes to come to fruition. At the same time, one must be persistent in supporting that which one has put into creation as long as it is noble. So this is what you find. That is where patience and persistence come in.
thank you for that. Now, the next question I want to ask is, can we do this on our own, this spiritual growth, or do we need help? And I know this might sound a little bit funny, but do you need a life partner? Because that means you're always interacting with somebody closely in your life. So yes, can we do this on our own, or do we need to be with someone?
The key here is each personality needs to journey along the path it has woven for itself. However, you find the case where there are many whose paths keep crossing, and therefore there is a need to join forces in serving together. In that particular scenario, you now find supporting activities or complementary activities to ensure that many things are fully accounted for. For on the one hand, you may find that someone has some skills in a particular area, and another has complementary skills in another area. And in joining forces, in joining their abilities, or in the union of those abilities, you now have that it makes it simpler and easier to move forward. That is more of like a service together, bringing up or bringing together of different abilities which complement each other.
Yeah.
So yes, it is helpful. On the other hand, it is possible that if exercise, is patience is not exercised in these matters, it may turn out to be otherwise, where each one will be searching and pointing to the faults of the other So again, this is where patience comes in, and the understanding that people need to come together to work together doesn't mean challenges have been eliminated. A very mundane thing is similar to the football teams which people have, in which in the team you have the goalkeeper and then you have those who play in other positions. They all have their weaknesses and they have their strong points. But in serving together, in playing together, in cooperating, they achieve a goal. And that is why when you hear a goal has been scored, they now achieve a particular goal and they are able to move forward. Whereas if they do not cooperate, they are likely to lose. So this is a very simple and practical example that one may use. You cannot turn around and say the goalkeeper is useless, he's no good, all right, and therefore you will not support, you won't defend the goalkeeper. Neither can the goalkeeper say, oh, those people playing in the forward are useless, and therefore he won't send the ball to them. When we have scenarios where you have two people that complement, then they need to work together and focus on the strategic thing which has brought them together, rather than on the mere tactics on how to achieve those strategic goals.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I want to point out something. When you gave the example of the football team, they always have a coach. Let's say when you have a marriage or sort of relationship, life partner, you don't get a coach. Does that mean it's a good idea that you should have a coach as well for the marriage or for a relationship?
Very good point.
Yes.
Life itself is there to teach you and to keep things within the family. There are some who go to marriage counselors. But the key thing here, a couple that have so many resources will not say because they have challenges, they'll go to a marriage counselor. They want to protect their finances and therefore they keep it to themselves. Yes, there are those who go to marriage counselors to learn one or two things. But even in the case of the coach can only make suggestions. It doesn't mean the coach needs to come into the field and kick the ball for you. So the decision is theirs.
And another aspect, what you described was like a harmonious working, and obviously that is possible. But let's say there's a lot of possibility also where people disagree, and you could call it challenge, and it takes time for each one to get used to the other person's, like their habits, and it's like one has a particular view. I'm talking of a relationship again, like a life partner relationship where one person, let's say the husband, says one thing and the wife is disagreeing with that, and then obviously you can't both do what each one cannot do. How can I say, you can't agree basically, and so let's say sometimes the husband will say, okay, I'll let you have that one, and I will just, next time I will try to sort of not exactly win, but try to have what I want, what I would like to do. So my question about all this is, because the original question was all about, do we need to be with someone to go spiritually? And I know you said there's not absolute necessity to have a partner, but then when you do have somebody, it's like you interact all the time with them, and then that way you're like, whatever you do, there's a mirror. Whatever you say, or whatever action you take, there's a reaction from the other person, and then you can see, oh, maybe I need to change this. And on your own, there's no mirror, so there's nobody reacting to you, so you can't see those things. Let's say at least it's not obvious to you, immediately obvious. You might see it after maybe 5 years. You do the same thing over and it doesn't, see other people maybe responding, and then you think, oh, maybe it's not a good idea. But by having somebody closer to you, it's like you get an immediate response in your development, let's say. So would you say it may not be essential to have somebody, but it helps speed? When I say speed, it doesn't mean we need to go at 100 miles an hour. It just helps move you forward quicker.
A simple example would be, what great help would one develop, and how do one see the situation where someone needs to cultivate patience in the shortest possible time, unless there is someone around to test that patience? We can now imagine if one were on one zone where everything, in quotes, is okay, where would one learn the patience? But a partner, or it could be a child, to test one's patience, in quotes, or to provide an opportunity where patience and perseverance, and in developing those patience and perseverance in helping one to improve himself or herself, that becomes more of a strategic gain, because one has now improved spiritually. However, there are scenarios where both parties may decide to go their ways, for one reason or the other. But for people to come together at all, there must be some commonality. There must be something homogeneous in such a way that they are now prepared to complement. Complementarity is not achieved in a second. It may take a whole lifetime of quietly observing and working very hard to achieve it. So it is not something which, okay, today it's okay, I'm complimentary to this person and that's the end of it, and everything is as you expect it to be. You build up in steps. You build up in silence, in quiet observation, and making corrections where things have gone bad. So whatever the situation, scenario, it turns out to be very helpful if, on the other hand, the partner you have worked with decide to go his or her own way. Then the opportunities that were provided during the time we were together, if viewed from a spiritual standpoint of view, would have helped in either polishing one party or the other. In that case, it is always a gain.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrusheen. And the topic we are discussing tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. You can join in the discussion by contacting us on this number, which is 079 444 31366. That's a UK number, and you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. And if you want to get a copy of the Grail message or want to get more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, GRAIL, message, MESSAGE.com. Gregory, the one aspect we haven't gone into so far is spiritual freedom, because the topic tonight is the struggle for spiritual freedom. And I had a question, basically. All these spiritual teachings tell us to obey the Almighty, obey His laws, do His will. So I'm wondering, the spiritual freedom, is that like a reward that you only get after you have obeyed God, like on the earth, and obviously if you obeyed God on the earth and matured, like we said, is spiritual growth involved in it as well, and then the reward of that is the freedom in, let's say, in paradise, in the spiritual world. Is that what that freedom is meant to represent?
Well, looked at from an intellectual point of view, it might seem so, but it's very wrong. To obey the laws of creation, these same laws through which the person or the human spirit came into existence, is to enable the human spirit to swing in accordance with the will in such a way that the rays or the possibilities which exist in creation are such that it helps the human spirit to mature in a step-by-step manner and return home as a self-conscious human spirit. It is when the personality has arrived home as a self-conscious human spirit, only then will it say it is free from the constraints of the world of matter that it was sunk into in order to mature. There are no sorrows, but only joys. Therefore, one may say that those constraints are such which impact on it in the world of matter tend to hold it down when it doesn't follow the rules which have been applied or which have been put in place that will enable it to mature. In that particular case, it feels that those constraints, it feels heavy. It does not feel free because it keeps going around in circles and time and resources are wasted in these regions. So freedom, true freedom, is only the understanding and the application of the laws through which the human spirit, came into existence. For if it doesn't do that, it may still return home to the paradise of man, but this time as an unconscious spirit gem. That means the opportunities which were granted to it to mature far away from the paradise of mind, those opportunities, the human spirit, has wasted them, and therefore is unable to understand what is demanded of it. Whereas, had he listened or she listened to these opportunities, to these forces, then he would have found joy and moved back to paradise as a self-conscious human spirit where it can now live forever.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Now I want to talk another type of freedom. I know it's earthly freedom, but I just want to look at it as well. We see, nations or people wanting to have freedom for their own people, having their own country or having freedom within a state, and people fight for that. or protest for that. And now, is there any on that when people fight for that, in quotes, the earthly freedom for their people? Is there any spiritual aspect or benefit there, or is it um, because some people say, well, these people around them have their freedom and we don't, and so, and then you could still say, well, that is only on the earth and it's not a spiritual freedom. So is it like a worthy cause to fight for that national freedom? That's that, in a way I'm trying to get to that understanding. Or is it just totally two separate things, that there's a spiritual freedom and there is just an earthly freedom?
Whatever the situation is, one should first look at the facts and then look at the motive. The question will be, what will be the motive of this nationalistic so-called freedom? If it's to sort of to suppress other people, then it's completely useless. If the freedom, or the fight for freedom is such that it will enable the human spirit to take full responsibilities for its activities, then it becomes a worthy cause. For that is what is demanded of the human spirit. However, what you find that some of these so-called fight for freedom are clothed in different formats. And you have scenarios where some others just want power, but they now interpret it as, okay, we are fighting for freedom, and haven't attained the freedom, or when these things are granted to them, what do they do with it? It's something else. So it is the motive behind this that determines whether it is a worthy cause or unworthy cause. Now, how would you know the motive of those who say they are fighting for freedom? For many say one thing and mean another.
Okay, I was going to say, you're going to go into that. How do you know what is their motive? Is it genuine, or is it something else?
Well, this is where human intuition comes in.
Okay, sorry. Were you going to say more?
No, I want to stop there.
You want to stop there? Okay, I got it. All right. Let's look at another aspect now. Again, a bit earthly, but let's just look into that. So, what should the government have a role in building a nation in terms of inner growth and spiritual freedom? Should government play a role in that?
That's a very good question. But the government, when you say government constitutes a section of the people to represent the aspiration of the people. The government, are they aware of their full responsibilities before they start making decisions for others? Do they know the aspirations of others? If you wish to provide a solution to people's challenges, then you yourself must have experienced this beforehand to understand what it's all about. So it will be wrong to ask government to take a responsibility which they know nothing about. For governments, basically, which is just a body or a collection of people who are supposed to represent the whole populace and manage their affairs, they can only do that based on what they have known, not what they do not know. And if what they know is so limited, their judgment will be based on that. So those who constitute the government first need to educate themselves intuitively to know what it means to be a human being who strives for freedom, the innate freedom. They need to be fully aware of their responsibilities. Then many an error may be minimized.
Thank you for that. Now I want to go back to spiritual growth a bit, and another thing that we hear, let's say in spiritual teaching, is prayer, and I mean, you already said this is about spiritual development. So prayer alone doesn't sound to me that it can really be enough. So, but maybe prayer can be used to guide us, Gregory. Is that how are we meant to use prayer? Is it just prayer? I can ultimately see that it just can't be prayer alone. But let's say, if we do use prayer, how do we use prayer to help us in spiritual growth? Let's say it like that.
Well, the problem is the concept of prayer. Many, based on what they have come to know, is to absolve oneself from the reality and plead with forces which they do not yet comprehend, or with forces which they claim to know, to favor them, or because they have asked for it. But on a spiritual sense, it is very different. For the opportunities are passed on to you, all the strength, the energy is passed on to you through one's intuition, such that the personality will recognize what to do and then fulfill the tasks. The task which it has set for itself, or the task which creation expects the human spirit to be able to fulfill. In the strength being granted to the personality, and the personality making use of that strength and opportunity, that is prayer. Any other thing is a complete waste of time. That is prayer as it should be, to make use of the time and the opportunities granted and the strength granted to fulfill this opportunity is more like a prayer of thanksgiving. Thanksgiving to creation, to the Lord of creation who granted this opportunity and the power. And in making use of this, the human spirit matures in it. If, however, the human spirit turns away and refuses to follow that path, but to demand of its creator other things other than the path that it has laid in creation for the human spirit to follow, then is a complete waste of time, as will be seen from on high. So one has to understand the concept of prayer. Many a thing the human spirit asks for are demands, demanding that the owner of creation changes its laws to suit that particular human spirit. It shows no gratitude for the opportunities which has already been granted. So you find it's a completely different picture when prayer as it should be is mentioned. On the one hand, you have what bursts forth from one's intuition. On the other hand, you have formulated or formulas which had been sort of formed or calculated by the human brain. And these calculated prayers, so-called, lack any living intuition. And because they lack any living intuition, they do not go far. They lack any purity. Therefore, you have it as dead demands. Whereas those that sprung from the human spirit, from one's intuition, those ones are more alive, showing gratitude for the opportunities and asking to be shown the path in humility on how to achieve a particular goal. So there are two different things: intellectually formulated prayer and prayers that springs from out of the human spirit, intuition.
What about when you're in a helpless situation, helpless in, let's say you're very ill or somebody you close to is very ill and you're not able to, let's say the doctors or the hospital are not able to help them, and the only thing you can think of is pray to God and ask for help. Is that not a prayer?
Yeah, the scenario remains the same. For anything which lacks the human intuition in such scenario is completely useless. For what you find in many cases, when the human spirit has no alternative intellectually, then it occurs to it that there could be other ways that it could approach its maker in humility. In that case, it begs and asks in humility on how things should proceed. In that case, because those things now come from deep within the human spirit, the granting of those requests come from out of creation, and depending on its purity, these things are granted in accordance with the purity of that particular prayer. The fulfillment also vary. It doesn't mean because one has asked for something, the fulfillment will be in the way it expects it should be. That fulfillment depends on the granting. It depends on how things are seen from a strategic point of view, not in accordance with the personality who has asked to be helped. For the help should be left to him who has the power to grant.
Thank you for that, Gregory. What I think you've clarified there is you can make a prayer or say a prayer which is genuine out of need, but then you can't demand the result to be the way you would like the result to be, but rather what is best spiritually for that help to manifest. So like we're talking about people being ill and somebody praying for them, and then you want them to recover. Obviously that's the aim of the prayer, but then you have a certain expectation of the recovery. And what I think you're trying to imply, if I'm correct, if I understand you correctly, that we shouldn't demand a specific set our fixed result what we would like, but rather that the help, the true help what that person needs, which may not be what we like.
Yeah, right? May I also add that questions of this nature were asked of the author of the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail Message, and he himself gave the perfect picture on how the laws of creation operate in creation, even in the human life. So the advice is for many, they should search for questions and answers, which are also published by the publishers of the Grail message. And similar questions will be found there, which are so very helpful and throws clarity in everything.
Thank you for that, Gregory. So, dear listeners, so as Gregory mentioned there, you can also find the answers to some of these questions we're talking about in this publication called Question and Answers. And that also would be available from this same website where the Grail message is available, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Okay. Another aspect of spiritual growth or development, people do, who are spiritually inclined, let's say, do meditation or such exercises. And do you think that is also, no, I won't say do you think, would you say that is helpful in spiritual growth?
In many occasions, people follow many different and varied paths to achieve a particular aim. Some are helpful, some are not so helpful. However, what should be noted is that there is a need to follow the simple paths rather than these complicated paths. Many withdraw from human beings in order to reflect on one thing or the other, and they find that finally they do not come to any clarity. However, each personality has its own free will to decide how they wish to go. For if you say don't follow that path, it's a wasted effort, for many will follow that same path. So only through experience, only when they have gone through many things, will they now decide of the benefits. If on the long run, having spent time in meditation, they are unable to come to any better maturity, then that is a lesson which they have learned, which will now be applied to their spiritual maturity. Most of this that you mentioned are only intellectual exercises to sort of satisfy spiritual longing. That which is of spirit is very different.
Thank you for that. Another thing is, of course, we have many spiritual teachings, and obviously people are from all different faiths or different backgrounds, and they follow those, let's say. And now, as we know, that there can be differences in these teachings, and so how will that, if people are in a particular faith or follow a particular teaching, again, there may be a struggle for them in their spiritual growth. How can they progress in that? Should they keep asking questions about their teaching, or look at other teachings, and how can they progress in their spiritual growth?
Whatever teaching one is involved with, one should not forget to use its own innate intuition. For intuition is an expression of the activities of the spirit. If a teaching does not encourage the use of intuition, then that teaching is dead.
Thank you for highlighting that so clearly and making it a crucial point, making that a big point. So yeah. Now another thing is temptation. You could say wherever you go in the world, let's say the nasty things or the let's say things which are healthy and good for you, they don't taste as nice as the unhealthy things. And similarly, you could call them, say, sinful things or bad habits, gambling, excessive drinking, or whatever bad habits we can think about, or even let's say more evil things, where people are defrauding us or something like that. Somehow, making quick money or something like this seems to be attractive to, obviously not every human being, to some human beings, or temptations happen and people fall into those temptations. Is there a way to overcome these temptations? Because we can't remove the temptation. Is there any way we can overcome it?
Well, in the first case, it must be realized that there must be something hidden in the corner of the soul of a human being that makes some low thing or some ignoble thing to be attractive. Otherwise, if it lacked those hidden weaknesses that it has in its soul, it will not be attracted. So most of these things are based on the attraction of homogeneity or the attraction of homogeneous species. The key to this is to engage in other activities other than those ones to be able to move forward. For what you yourself do not use gradually will fall away. If, however, you put yourself in certain areas where those weaknesses abound, then you have a greater probability of moving towards a quick downfall. Whereas if you move away or you strive to move away and recognizing that these things which you now sense are of no good to the human spirit, having sensed them, and you make the necessary effort to move away, what you will then have is a scenario where there will be a diminution of this ability or this attraction, and before long it will fall away completely and you arrive as a new personality. However, you find there are many who do so in an intellectual fashion. That means intellectually they say it, but hidden in the corner of their soul, all right, they do not make any effort.
Thank you for that. Now, if you look at, let's say, specific type of people who are, you could say, addicted to these, let's say, vices or evil habits, how could, I know you have given your answer, that you can only be, let's say, trapped into this temptation if you yourself have something similar that attracts you there. But if you are already in there and you're stuck, like addicted, like I say, and you want to come out of it, is it just willpower that will get you out of it, or because there's like you could say the temptation is always strong, and you could say just by you could say just saying I want to leave this, it might not be enough strength to actually for you to actually leave what this habit that you have.
I think it's necessary to first examine how one found its path to that place where it is trapped. If one is able to do that, which requires a lot of so-called willpower, then one may now reverse and move away from it. For if you say you are trapped, and you know if you don't extricate yourself, you may lose your arms, you may lose your sight, then one will make a decision and strive to move away because you now realize the implication. However, what happens, many are so weak. They are strong intellectually, but they are spiritually very weak.
Thank you for that. That sort of reminds me of what Jesus said: the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So, and how you've pointed it out that you do need to look at what is it that led you there, and if you realize the consequences of what's going to happen if you stay there, trapped, then maybe that will put enough fear into you to say, not necessarily fear, maybe you want to be free, and you'll find a way, because you'll have looked into it deeply enough to say, no, this is not. I'm not. I'm not going to allow this to happen to me, and I must find a way out. So I thank you for that. Your words there. We have talked about intuition. What about conscience? Our conscience, because does that help us to grow spiritually?
What is referred to as intuition is a combination of many things. For even through one's intuition, conscience comes in. As long as these spring up from non-intellectual activities, then one may refer to it as conscience. That means the input of others who may not be incarnate like we are. For here on earth, one has the physical body, and the physical body produces the brain, and the brain produces the intellect. Whereas once the physical body is no more in activity, then what you have is the human soul that has different clothing in order to be able to operate in the realm that it has found itself. In many occasions, you do find there are people of similar tendencies with good volition who intend to redeem themselves through their good volition in advising you as a person, such that you will not fall in to certain traps which have been set. In that scenario, these collection form parts of one's conscience, for they contribute to the advice such that you are able to move forward courageously, and they themselves sever themselves from those threads that has bound them in these regions. So these are the people or the collection of people or collection of forces that form one's conscience as distinct from that which is intellectual. So as long as these things spring from one's intuition, then one would say it is right.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Blessed Radio. Is the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And the topic of discussion for tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. We'd love you to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 31366. That's a UK number, that's what I meant to say. So that's 079 444 31366. And you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. And if you are interested to get a copy of the Grail message or even question and answers, as my colleague Gregory mentioned earlier, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that. www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And just to remind you, the topic for discussion is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. So, what I want to talk about now is, yes, is there a connection, Gregory, between growing spiritually and true freedom? Is there some connection there?
Of course, there is always a connection between growing spiritual and true freedom. True freedom of the spirit. One has to distinguish between freedom of the intellect and freedom of the spirit. So if it is freedom of the spirit, yes. Otherwise, it is not. For you find scenarios where one is free from want of of material things, and yet spiritually languid. There are some that have so much so-called material resources or money, and at the same time have fallen asleep. There are some that are intellectually brilliant, but their spirit is asleep. So, with freedom of the spirit and the growth of the spirit, as long as we are referring to the spirit, yes. But in general, if one is referring to that of the earth, where one has so much resources at one's disposal, but does not know how to control it, then the answer is no.
Thank you for that. Now, I want to sort of come back to the earth again, you could say. In the news, in fact, it was on Sunday, there was a documentary, no, not a documentary, a program on BBC with Prince William, sharing with mostly English famous footballers, where talking about basically each one sharing their own story about depression and grief and one of the reasons this program was made was that in UK, men under 40, lot of people. Let's say the biggest killer, I believe, if I may be wrong on this because I might have got it slightly wrong, but let's say one of the biggest killers for men under 40 is suicide, men committing suicide, because mainly because they don't want to talk about the things they're dealing with. It's considered unmanly or weak. That a man is weak if he has to talk about his problems. And so this meant, now as we know, world is changing, times are changing, people are opening up more and more and more. You hear stories which you didn't used to hear when 20, 30 years ago, and so here Prince William is encouraging with these famous footballers together by sharing their own stories. For example, in the case of Prince William, his mum was Princess Diana, and she died when they were just like, I think he was just 11 or something. It was a big thing for him, a big grief for him, and he kept it within himself, and and he said that this pain was the biggest pain of his life, than any other pain. So. And then what he said is actually when he meets other people and he can see it almost in their eyes, if they have had a similar situation, that grief, he can sense it himself. So by sharing about these stories of people, each one who has suffered such, let's say, pains and feeling even depressed maybe, they feel this is a way to release their pain and to stop. Obviously the idea is to cut down on the suicides as well, of course. And also one thing he pointed out is when you share it with people who have the similar situation as you have experienced, it's like somehow they feel relieved or released there. So Gregory, what do you say on that is that good to share about our personal struggles and painful experiences with other people, or should you keep it locked inside you?
Such sharing helps in an intellectual relief. It lacks the spiritual relief, which should bring strength and encouragement in moving forwards and upwards. For it is the intellect which responds, and in finding no way out of a particular scenario, decides to call it in, to give up, and to end its life. Whereas the spirit, were the spirit alive and astir as it should be, then it will realize that sorrow as well as joy helps it to awaken to the challenges in creation and to respond to it. Then it knows that here on earth it's only a journeyman passing through to gather experiences, which experiences are necessary for the spirit for it to go back home to the paradise of man, where those challenges will have been sorted and done, and it need fear no depression. But because the spirit is fairly languid, it does not make use of these opportunities. On the other hand, it tends to go more into material things, considering material to be the sole thing that should be catered for. And in the so-called famous footballers, they themselves, had they reflected on the non-material, then they would, in accordance with seek and you shall find in spiritual things, would be drawn to those genuinely of spiritual things such that they can share, and they will then see things very differently. And such opportunities are very manifold. If, however, they do not seek after that and only look at the material things, then you have a scenario where that which they seek is of spiritual, deep within them, and yet the intellect, not having a solution to that, decides to give it up and say, look, I don't understand this. So you have a scenario in which the spirit is in a quagmire, unable to express itself, unable to move forward or backwards. So if they seek deeply within themselves, spiritually, if they cry out for help deep within themselves, then in accordance with the promise of Christ, they will find that which they are seeking, and they will find recompense, and help will be granted them. But because they lack the personal conviction of the words of Christ, even if they have the words in their lips, they do not know how to go about it. They give up. So you have many a famous person, or many a pastor, or many a Muslim, whatever they care to call themselves, they decide to go on the path of suicide. Suicide is throwing away the opportunities which has been granted to you to mature here on earth because you have some challenges. Similar to Alexander, who cut the cord because he couldn't find a solution. Yes, these challenges abound, but seek deep within yourself. In these thorny days, we now have the walk in the light of truth, which walk provides answers, solutions to all. If man searches, very, very vigorously into the walk, that which it seeks, it will find. And these questions of suicide, of depressions, will vanish if it seeks humbly in it.
Thank you, Gregory, for that. And Gregory, I just want to follow up a bit more about suicide, because people are obviously thinking they're ending their life, that is the end of the story, and they're out of the situation. But actually, can you tell us, when somebody commits suicide, what actually happens to them? Is there, because obviously they think they've run away from this situation. But can you tell us what actually happens there?
Well, suicide is a scenario where one throws away the opportunities which have been granted it to mature. Prior to that, there are the thoughts which have assailed one, which one has held very tightly. Thoughts have forms, and those forms, they react on us retroactively. These thoughts are entities which, to a large extent, outlive us. So when you have the scenario of suicide, those thoughts still abound and affect the soul that has just ended the opportunities granted it. Because it has ended these opportunities, it has placed a barrier between itself and the help that granted these opportunities. Therefore, it is on its own. It's on its own in a region of darkness because it has placed a barrier by forcefully ending its own life. It therefore means help. Even those who wish to offer help cannot reach it because it does not need that help or doesn't listen to that help. It is a terrible scenario to be in. It's of little avail for one to paint a picture right now, but a full picture can be found in the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message. There, it answers all questions.
Thank you for that, Gregory. And I want to follow on what you've just said there. People do have questions, spiritual questions in their life, and you have said the Grail message answers all questions. But is it really true? How can you know that? Have answers to all your questions? Because something happens to you, and most of the time we never discover why this happened to us. As you say, we use the intellect most of the time to understand these things, which is not going to answer the question. It only, maybe, I don't know if it even relieves in any way, because it's in a way you could call it all speculation when you use the intellect. So the only real answers are given in the spiritual pictures that we can receive. So yes, my question again, is it really possible to answer every question?
Yes, it is possible to provide an answer to all questions that many will ask. However, the answers provided may not be in accordance with the one's will asking it. For there will be distorted pictures or questions which are distorted, which are not in accordance with the laws through which the human spirit, came into creation. And yet he wants solutions to those things which should not be existing, but which it imagines it exists. Therefore, when solutions are provided in accordance with the laws of creation, it will have doubts because it hasn't matured to that extent to know that what the soul, has held on to are only distorted pictures. Moreover, one must understand, if you do not seek, you will not find. To seek or to ask questions, the idea of questions or the concept of a question is a quest. When one makes a quest, it's like a journey or procedure. Then one should be humble enough that when you set out for a quest, you yourself must know you have to go cautiously and examine all that comes your way in accordance with one's intuition. If one doesn't have the capabilities of interpreting of the responses that one comes across as one is on one's quest, then the likelihood is there that it may sound confused. And that is what you find in many scenarios. Many a man asks questions and does not understand that it's on a quest and needs to develop itself gradually, bit by bit, to be able to comprehend it. And when a solution is provided, no matter how genuine and right it is, it sort of rejects it because it is not matured enough. So the first step in a quest or in a question is to develop yourself to such maturity that abounds in life through the simple examples, through the simple manifestations that you see in everyday life, in such a way such that when the answers to your quest hit you, you are able to interpret them aright. So, yes, all questions can be answered, but the questioner, has he got the inner ability to differentiate that which is genuine and right in accordance with the laws of creation? That is a different discussion altogether.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Now I want to move to another topic that is in the news in the last few days, I think even week, which is happening in the USA. Certain states, or a couple of states of the US, have now made it illegal for abortion, and then there are people who are pro-abortion, let's say. That's not how they want to call themselves, but they, let's say, have the freedom to use abortion. Maybe that's the better way, and are obviously protesting against that decision. And it's like everybody's got their own view on this matter, and I wanted to go into the spiritual aspect of it. So, I mean, one group is arguing, oh, this is a life, and nobody has got a right to take away this life, even though it's an unborn life. And then the other one group is saying, no, this is women's rights, that this is our body, and we must be allowed to have freedom to choose what we do with the body, and nobody can tell us what to do. So, can you give us a spiritual understanding of what is happening here? Because in a way, everybody's got a point, if you look at it. And then there's even some exceptional cases. Maybe you can look at that as well when you answer that if somebody has been raped, a woman's been raped, or then they should have the right to terminate that unborn child. So let us not go to that just in this moment, but more to look at the overall picture first, and then we can examine that after that.
There is only one picture which says, as a man sows, so shall he or she reaps. For those on both sides, the for and against, they themselves first need to examine, not only with the intellect, but also with the spirit, in such a way that they become clear deep within themselves. Of course, each person has a free will and is free to determine how he or she needs to move, whether it needs to move down or remain at the same level or to go back. Most of these discussions are tactical, and there is argument for and against. But the real matter is not approached. Which real matter is that of the spirit or that of the soul? What do they know of the soul that is approaching for reincarnation? What do they know of the reactions of events which had been sown in the past? None at all. So, to provide a clear answer, one will have to ask both parties first to listen to their intuition and base their arguments on their inner clarity. Without that, it becomes an intellectual dribbling, one trying to hold one's corner. If one says abortion is murder, the next question is prove it. So, like we said in the previous question, is when there are questions and arguments, the questioner is on a quest. It means that when the responses come, which examine a matter not only intellectually but also intuitively, they are in a position to grasp it the way it is. If they're unable to do that, they only want to see an intellectual part of it, then it becomes one-sided and it brings no relief. The best one may say is that such questions or such questioners should first clarify within themselves, and they walk in the light of truth. The grail message will be of great help, such that they will have an overall picture of whence they came, what they are doing here on earth, the times in which we stand, and whence they will have to move when they have left here, and the opportunities that are granted for many to make amends before they incarnate on earth, whilst they are on earth, and whether they will go when they leave here. Once they have clarity in these matters, then maybe one may listen to their questions, if there are any.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to the spiritual discussion program on Blessed Radio. And the aim of the program is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And the topic we are discussing tonight is the struggle for spiritual growth and freedom. And we'd love to hear from you. We haven't heard anybody so far, but we hope somebody will contact us if they want to. The number to contact us here in UK is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, you've emphasized the need for using or having spiritual knowledge to have understanding on these matters that we've been talking about. And, every question you said can be answered. And also you've mentioned that the way people are looking at most of these matters of life is through the intellect, which cannot answer those questions. It's only really spiritual knowledge. And I'm just thinking now, how should you said, and the way to approach it is to be humble, and and to obviously examine whatever is put in front of you. So, and I want to just understand, and you also mentioned about what Jesus said, seek and you shall find. So how do the answers arrive? Is it that you say a prayer? I know we've talked about prayer before. You send out your question, let's say, in your thought, in your mind, and then, let's say, somebody is guided towards you to talk to you, and then you say something, and that prompts them to say something, or you receive the answer by yourself, I'm not saying there must be one way to get an answer, but how does the process work? Let me say like that you get the answers that you have questions about.
When there is a cry for spiritual help, there are, or it is assumed that answers will be provided, and that these answers will arrive through channels. The channels which we ourselves do not yet know. And the answers are provided which are what one referred as complete, very involving, not just partial answers, but full answers, all embracing answers, one may call it that way. And therefore, many forces are involved, or many channels are involved. Some of the channels may be that someone is led to your path or you to someone's path. Another channel is the sensing or the feeling of calmness, which some closest to you who are advising you because you have uttered that cry for help, and because they are near to you, are able to console you. That is another channel. There are also others along the paths which one may experience. But the key thing here is that as long as it is spiritual seeking, within the scheme of things and the structures which have been placed in this construction one may refer to as creation, there are forces which help to pass on the necessary experience such that you become convinced beyond doubt. For it is the intellect that shows doubts, because it is limited to the earthly conceptions of time and space. And because of its limitation, it cannot comprehend what is beyond its own territory. Therefore, one may say that answers will come, but how and when they will come also depend on the recipient or the one who has cried out. For there are scenarios where you have a cry out for help and the answers come instantaneously. But within a very short space of time, the crier has already changed, has already put conditions on how this help must reach it. That was why I once said, a questioner must be ready, must be prepared, and it's assumed it has the inner ability to differentiate that which is a real response to his question. For if it has changed its inner attitude, then when the responses come, they are unable to penetrate. For its vibration is now different from the original vibrations when it was calling out for help. So the scenarios vary. The scenarios are manifold. But the key thing, when one cries out for help, let it be a cry that has arisen from out of the spirit. And one should maintain simplicity and humility. Humility in the sense of not dictating how the help should come and when it should come. Then it will be overwhelmed by the responses that have been placed in creation to help the human spirit that is in need.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got a different question now, which is about martyrs being. So let's say you believe in a cause, and I'm not talking now of a war between two countries or something, where people are called up for the army and they're fighting for one nation and fighting the other nation because you're trying to defend your nation. Or I'm talking more of something that, let's say, you believe in, and then let's say there's a fight on that, maybe even, I don't want to say physical necessarily, but it turns into that in the sense that you are put at risk and danger for believing or promoting what you believe in, and unfortunately that can result in death because of that country has some let's say system that it might be a country, it could be a group, just a few group of people turn against you for you expressing or defending your particular fight for your cause that you're doing. So my question, and then people call that, if you die in that for your cause, a martyr. So my question is, Gregory, is that right to fight for a cause that you believe and then be willing to give up your life for that cause?
It's a very good question, but one would say one must struggle or fight for a cause one is convinced of, not just merely believing in. For if belief is not subjected to different aspects, to different trials, one will not understand what lies behind belief. But a cause where one is convinced of it, one will not move away. One will stand one's ground. In that case, because one is convinced of it, which conviction has arisen from out of the Spirit, the Spirit then is prepared to move forward. And if in moving forward, it means those others will have to deprive the spirit of the physical body, the spirit is unperturbed because it is convinced of such causes. Such is what happened to the personality that brought divine love to mankind. If, however, one is not convinced of a cause, then you have a scenario where the smallest change, the person now abandons that path. One then wonders what belief one will call such. So there are causes which are filled with spiritual emotion, whereas there are causes which are only highly intellectual. On the surface, they look alike, but one deep within, one is alive and the other is dead. This is what happens to many of the so-called religions, where many things are based on beliefs, which beliefs, when subjected to the laws of creation through which everything came into existence, those beliefs vanish because they hold no ground, since they are dead within. Whereas that which is alive, which has sprung from out of the Spirit, is alive by its nature and is able to put up resistance, is able to call for help, which call is alive itself. So these are two different things, belief and conviction.
Thank you, Gregory. we've come to the end of our show. Well, it's 5 minutes to go, but I just thought I would like to just read something from the Grail message uh, for our listeners. And I know we've read it before, but I just thought it's also again appropriate again. And it's just the beginning of the Grail message, which is for your guidance. And just to point everyone to, at the end of the day, what we've been discussing here is all about spiritual knowledge, and the answers were good for everyone to be, let's say, to be actually fulfilled within themselves. You know, that the answers are really answered. It's only spiritual knowledge that can answer those questions. So I want to point to the Grail message for that, and the first part of that first page of that, you can say, is for your guidance. So I'm going to read that out. The bandage falls, and belief becomes conviction. Liberation and redemption lie only in conviction. I am addressing earnest seekers only. They must be able and willing to examine this matter objectively. Religious fanatics and irresponsible enthusiasts may hold aloof, for they are detrimental to the truth. As for the malevolent and prejudiced, they shall find their sentence in the very words. The message will strike only those who still carry within them a spark of truth and the yearning to be true human beings. To all such it will become the shining light and staff. It will lead them unswervingly out of all the chaos of the present day confusion. The following word does not bring a new religion, but is intended as the torch to help all serious listeners or readers find the right path, which leads them to the longed for height. Only he who bestirs himself can advance spiritually. The fool who uses extraneous aids for this, in the form of ready-made opinions of others, only walks his path as if on crutches, while ignoring his own healthy limbs. But the moment he boldly uses all the abilities which lie dormant within him, awaiting his call to help in his ascent, he is employing the talent entrusted to him in accordance with his Creator's will, and will easily overcome all obstacles that seek to divert him. Therefore awake. Genuine faith lies only in conviction, and conviction comes solely through an inflexible weighing and examining. See that you are truly alive in the wonderful creation of your God. Abrushin. Dear listeners, thank you for listening to us tonight. I'm just going to ask Gregory, would you like to say anything to the listeners, Gregory?
Well, I wish everybody well and wish them a wonderful week.
Thank you for that. And yes, same from me, listeners. Thank you for joining us. Hope you found the show enjoyable and also spiritually enlightening. And we'll be back as usual next Tuesday with another topic. Hope you can join us again. All the best, everyone. And I wish you a great week. God bless. Brother Saram should be here soon. Bye.